Bonjour à tous. Je vous salue depuis le panel live du Bureau Export. Je suis Françoise Claire et je dirige le pôle classique et jazz. Salut. J'ai le grand plaisir de vous présenter ce magnifique panel pour parler du UK ce matin, qui sera modéré par Eric Denut. Donc, à qui je vais donner la parole. Je voulais juste vous préciser que ce panel sera accompagné d'une étude qui a été faite sur le marché de la musique classique au Royaume-Uni, qui vous sera adressée via les canaux de communication du bureau export habituel. Et je vous invite donc à y prêter attention. Merci beaucoup. À toi, Eric.
Merci beaucoup, François. Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. First and foremost, our participants. We have an amazing panel. You just said it, François. So we know how everyone's time is tense nowadays, and we're all very much grateful that you are all with us. Please let me introduce our participants with a very short hello. Gillian Moore, Director of Music at South Bank Centre. Hi, Gillian. Hello, Chichi Nwanoku, which are joiners. Chichi is founder and CEO and artistic director of Chineke. Hello, Chichi.
Hello.
Hi, Lydia Connolly, head of the artist management department at Harrison Parrott in London. Hi, Lydia.
Hi.
Hello, Richard. Richard Heaton is the head of St. John Smith Square concert series in the inner city of London. Hello, Richard.
Hi.
Guillaume Descottes is the CEO and founder of Vialma, web streaming service based in London, most active in the UK, France, and the continent. Hi, Guillaume.
Hi.
Graham Mackenzie, the head of the Huddersfield Music Contemporary Festival in North England. Hello, Graham.
Hey, everyone. Hello.
So let me please start, maybe ladies first, maybe with Gillian, if it's okay with everyone. I have to start with someone. Maybe start with short panorama of what has happened in your institution in this quite interesting year to 2020. The year has not finished yet, but we had, to say the least, some, historical events happening in the last 6 months. I would love having from you, dear Gillian, a short insights about, specific things like what has been happening in the institution. How did you cope with the new situation? What could you tell us about artists, repertoire, specific contents you may have planned for this upcoming season 2021, and you needed maybe to change or modify it slightly, or maybe a little bit more than slightly? And maybe also, some of your reaction on what it means for you as a managing executive of a leading concert hall in the capital of the UK, what it means now for you being in this classical music market in the current context. So maybe in a few minutes, give us your a short history of what you have experienced in this last month. We can't hear you, Gillian. Maybe you should unmute.
Sorry about that. I was just saying thank you, Eric, and it's wonderful to be on this panel with such good friends from the UK and from France. South Bank Centre, as many of you will know, is not just a concert hall. It's 3 main venues, Royal Festival Hall, Queen Elizabeth Hall, and the very small Purcell Room, and the Hayward Gallery, and 17 acres of very public space on the banks of the River Thames. And when I think of my place of work, I think of a real place of congregation, of gathering together of people, of artists. The space is open 364 days of the year. The foyers are open to the public all the time. People gather there. There are free performances as well as all the concerts and events that you can buy tickets for. So the idea that that's the very thing we can't do, bringing people together is the very thing that we can't do, is just heartbreaking for everybody. It's heartbreaking for us who run the South Bank, but also for all the artists that we work with, for the orchestras, the resident orchestras and associate orchestras. Chichi is here from Chineke, who I'm proud to say are one of our associate orchestras. And in fact, because of the huge loss of income that South Bank's sustained in this period, we've not been able to open our doors to the public, and only very recently to artists. I'll talk about that in a moment. We've lost £25 million in this year of our income. That includes not only ticket income and income from orchestras and promoters renting the halls, but also the South Bank. I think, unlike in France, we have a model where public subsidy is not such a big part of the arts scene. So we depend partly on commercial income. We depend not only on conferences and graduations, but also on cafes and restaurants and shops. And until 6 months ago, this was seen in the kind of, ever since Margaret Thatcher, this was seen as a virtue. Let's wean ourselves off public subsidy. Let's earn income in new and entrepreneurial ways. But actually, that's proved to be a really very big Achilles heel for big organizations like the South Bank Centre, because of course the hospitality, the restaurant, the shops industry has suffered almost as much as the arts has. So that's been a real blow to our operating model. But with an enormous sense of excitement and hope, it's been wonderful to welcome our orchestras, musicians back to the festival hall this week. We've had the London Philharmonic Orchestra in already. They gave their first digital online concert last night, which will be streamed next week on the 30th of September. And we are going to be working with our partners, presenting 32 orchestral concerts, some major talks and events programs, and they've already, the opening one of those has already happened. The great civil rights leader, Angela Davis. And we've worked with our orchestras and partners. We'll be doing comedy as well. We'll be doing some contemporary, non-classical music, some gigs. We've worked with all of our partners to make as diverse and interesting a programme as possible. I'll talk later about the opportunities, but there are some elements of this devastating, dreadful situation that have given us some new opportunities to develop new ways of thinking and new ways of working. So that's, in very broad terms, where we are at the moment, opening up finally, but not to the public, only online at the moment.
Amazing, amazing. So we come back to the opportunities and maybe more detail. Quite naturally, I would maybe love giving now the word to Chichi. You mentioned the fact Chineke is associate orchestra. Maybe I'll let Chichi describe a little bit more in detail. What is Chineke doing exactly? I must say, in France, in the continent, unfortunately, Chineke has not been doing that much as it should have. Of course, we are following proms, South Bank centers, events, and many different seasons, and we know very much how innovative and disruptive this new initiative has been, and how delightful it has been for many of us to see this thriving. But of course, last 6 months have probably also impacted much of the activity. So please give us, Chichi, your views and thoughts about what has happened, how it did impact your institution, and what's coming next now in the very, very next days and weeks for Chineke. Also to unmute, please.
Thank you, Eric. And I echo Gillian in saying It's thank you for inviting me to be part of this super panel and discuss these things that need to be discussed and shared, actually. And from, there's always something that what you can glean from what everybody's got to say. Chineke, for those of you who don't know what Chineke is, it's Europe's first majority Black, Asian and ethnically diverse orchestra, and there's a junior orchestra as well. And right from the very beginning, we've been invited to the South Bank, and we were made an associate orchestra after our very first concert, which was 5 years ago, just last week. So we just celebrated our 5th birthday. Well, since lockdown, I mean, we had a lot of things planned this year, and like everybody else, but I have found, just kicking into my own nature, really, in that I've always been one of these people who, when I hear the word no, I try to turn that into a yes. And I think a lot of us like to think that we do that sort of thing, but I really have been so active and busy in just because a lot of people have been very badly affected with mental health during this, and it's not just those people who are fortunate enough to have jobs with orchestras who are contracted, but most musicians in the UK are not in contracted orchestras. They are freelance, and therefore, no concert equals zero income. And that it's been incredibly difficult for a lot of people, and also our junior orchestra that found it very difficult as well, because they've had all their schoolwork and all of the lack of communication or lack of experience being with their teachers, being with their peers has been very, very hard on them. And then obviously relationships at home and things. But so Chineke, we've been so creative, and I think, we've been creating so many things during lockdown just to carry us through, and things, I think we've all got much more digital savvy. And I think what it's going to show that, because of our reliance on digital technology during these last 6 months, that our reliance on digital technology has been strengthened. And so we are going to be carrying that knowledge through. And we were very fortunate that we filmed our very last concert before lockdown. The very last public concert was live at the Queen Elizabeth Hall on the 23rd of February. We just happened to arrange to have that concert filmed, which we've been thanking our lucky stars because of that, because it became the guide track to a digital recording we made of the same piece by Samuel Coleridge Taylor. And then literally the day after that concert, we went into the St. John Smith Square, Richard, and we filmed for this new documentary that's coming out on BBC TV on Sunday with Lenny Henry and Susie Klein, all about Black classical music and all of those composers and musicians who've basically been airbrushed and written out of history. So those 2 last days that we were together are on camera and have been incredibly useful. Our orchestra, I know we're just a startup orchestra, really. We have a handful of concerts, but I mean, I must say that in the 6 months that the lockdown has cost, we've lost £350,000 worth of orchestra fees. So, and to us, that's quite a lot. And that's why we've been trying to do these digital things to put some pennies into our players' pockets. Actually, last Saturday, we were invited to be part of the YouTube festival. And I think they do have these festivals, but normally in person. But they've filmed 3 different acts. And we were just given 5 minutes, and we performed a piece by the wonderful British composer Erlyn Wallen. We just filmed the first movement of her Concerto Grosso at the London Palladium. It's for violin, double bass and piano solos with string orchestra. So that's going to be on air on YouTube on the 8th of October, I think. I've been involved in all of the weekly meetings with the South Bank and their associated orchestras, talking about how we all come through all of this and supporting each other with ideas and whatever we possibly can. And also I've been involved in a lot of the weekly meetings with Black cultural leaders across the country. And this kicked in after the George Floyd murder. And that's been an incredibly strong resource for me and all of the leaders of other organizations across the country. We've been discussing any number of things, one of which you're going to be hearing about soon, because we've got this acronym that we're all bunched under, which is called BAME, B-A-M-E, which is supposed to stand for Black, Asian and Minority Ethnic. And it's an acronym with consequences, because it just heaps whole loads of people into one thing. And of course, everybody, no two people are the same, not even Black people. And also, if you're Irish or Hungarian or Romanian or Czech, you also come under BAME. So when people talk about the fact that they are really, really diverse, and in fact, Gillian, I was sitting at a table with Gillian 2 years ago when at the Royal Philharmonic Society Awards, when Vladimir Jurowski won the Conductor Award. And these awards, they're like the Oscars in classical music awards. And it's like, you know, all the classical music royalty are at these awards. And he won the Conductor Award. And in his speech, he said that the London Philharmonic Orchestra was the most diverse orchestra in the UK, at which everybody sitting around my table stared at me and everybody's jaw hit the table, because every single member of the management, the board, the orchestra is completely white. And yet he said they're the most BAME orchestra in the country. And you see, this is why it's unhelpful. And actually it puts back the struggle. And, you know, and so I will just to speed things up a bit. There's a campaign that's about to launch called #BAMEover, like game over, BAME over, and we will not be using an acronym. We will be using the words Black, Asian, and ethnically diverse. And I've been thrilled to see even the newsreaders on BBC and Channel 4 and ITV, they're already using that. No acronym. It's a bit of a mouthful. Black, Asian, and ethnically diverse. No word minority, because that's a negative. It implies a negative. And also, we're not also non-white, because that's also a negative. So there's a little heads up, and I think I'll stop for now and chip in later.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Thank you, Gigi. Maybe you mentioned YouTube Festival, the upcoming BBC documentary on Black musicians and composers. Gillian mentioned the Inside Out programming going on with 32 concerts and talks. Richard, maybe you have had that concert or that documentary movie being filmed in your church/hall. I heard and read about the digital exchange program you have been starting. Can you maybe also give us some more ideas about how your concert series, your team, how you manage in the last 6 months, 7 months, what is upcoming in the next season? How did you have to change profoundly or less profoundly the contents of the season? So what's going on in St. John Smith's in the next days and weeks?
Sure. Well, thank you, Eric, and Ms. Gigi and Gillian. It's a privilege to be here today. So thank you for asking us all to share these very important discussions. So casting my mind back, if I can, even 6 months ago to the 16th of March, which is the day that we had our last concert, I think, like everybody else. It's actually almost impossible to think now what the program was meant to be at this point in the alternate reality, because we've gone through so many changes and so many rethinks over the past 6 months about how we might be able to do something that it is very difficult to think of. It's actually really useful, I think, to be on this panel with Gillian as well, our friends, very close friends at the South Bank Centre, because we're quite different as organisations. The South Bank is an absolute flagship huge public art centre, the largest in Europe, I think, and of course has many challenges in that respect. We, on the other hand, are relatively, well, I don't know about small scale, mid scale operation but not very far away from the South Bank Centre, actually, interestingly. And we mentioned about the way that the subsidy system in the UK is different from Europe in many ways. We actually don't receive any public subsidy. We rely on a mix of rental or high rental, philanthropy, a little bit of catering receipts, and some ticket revenue for what we do. But of course, overnight on the 16th of March, about 80% of our revenue stopped. So as an organisation, that is devastating and very challenging indeed. But we quickly thought, and like Chi-Chi, I like to turn no's into yeses, or at least when it's appropriate to do so. We quickly thought together, what can we do? How do we respond to this? What are our strengths within our organisation that maybe we can play to? And you mentioned St John Smith Square is actually a converted block church, which became Concert Hall in 1969. But we're quite unique because we don't have any fixed chairs. We just have a big open flat floor and a stage. And we also, because of the nature of the building, have 6 big doors that go straight to outside. So in this time of COVID secure venues and trying to find a way to work, we actually have bizarrely a little advantage. We can ventilate the space very quickly. We can set up for 5 players, 10 players, 20 players, either on the stage or in the middle of the floor or underneath the organ or wherever is appropriate. So we thought, we can try to see what we might be able to do and how we might be able to respond. We also have an ongoing relationship with many partners, and so we inevitably, because of the nature of the way we work, we have to collaborate with artistic partners because we're looking at, as I say, hall hires to make up a lot of the program. And we were acutely aware of the challenges which everybody is facing. So we did reach out in the summer once the stringent lockdown restrictions were relaxed a little, to say, what could we do? How can we work with you, both with the amateur sector and the professional sector that we work with? We started a series of online meetings with the amateur sector to try and help give advice and work with them as they start to plan their activity going back. And we also looked at how we could support the professional sector as much as we could. So we took a red pen to our budgets and things, and we actually reduced our hire fees for a period of 6 months, because although we're desperately in need of support ourselves, we thought, everybody is challenged at the moment. So if we can make it as affordable as possible for people to do something within the space, if they're able to, let's see how we can do that. And we've actually had a really good response to that. And so we have a number of partners and organizations using us for projects which are appropriate within the space, which started at the start of September. We've been holding recordings, we've been holding digital recordings, and from the 1st of October we do start a public concert series to a socially distanced audience. We're operating at less than 1/5 of our usual capacity, so financially it's devastating, but we do have some activity happening. And Chi-Chi mentioned the recording which Chineke made back just before the lockdown. We're delighted to say that they'll be back with us tomorrow to rehearse. So the more that we can support the sector, and indeed that concert then will go to Gillian at the South Bank for the digital transmission to everybody. So the lesson I think I've taken out of this, or the lesson is, collaboration is the only way that we can get through. We have to look at where we can work together, where we can support each other, look at what strengths we can have. Alongside the concert program that we have, we are also encouraging people to make digital versions of what they're doing, but trying to make the digital version not just a replica of a concert, but we're including interactive discussion, things like this, bits of rehearsal where we're taking apart pieces and explaining maybe one of the movements to people, and seeing how we can use that to engage perhaps with a wider audience than we have done previously. There was some fascinating research I saw which came out of the States that showed that that the digital activity that's been going on recently has reached much more widely to parts of the community that don't traditionally engage with concert going because of either barriers which are real or perceived, and if they're perceived, they're still real, about attending traditional concerts. And we're seen as a relatively traditional concert hall in one sense. So this opportunity to look at new ways of reaching audiences and new ways of engaging with people is something which I think is tremendously exciting. It will never take away from the visceral experience of live music making, and that's crucial that we get that back and that we're able to share that passion and energy and love of that. But if we can add a layer that then brings more people into that experience, I think it's really exciting, really interesting. It is absolutely early days in what we're doing now that we're starting to open up and finding the way in which we can do this. And of course, we all fear what the coming months will bring and whether we can continue with this activity. But I think we have learned a lot in the last few months about what we can do and how we can maybe adapt and change and work together. And I'm hoping that we can carry that forward and that becomes ingrained in the way we work going forwards, working in partnership with each other.
Thanks, Richard. It was revealing in many ways. Maybe I think most logical would be now to give say to Lydia. We have heard from Gillian, the digital program, no public concerts yet. Richard explaining 1/5 of the capacity can be used. Chichi telling us how she developed very new ways to talk to her audience on screen. So Lydia, you were running the Portman Artist Management Department of one of the world-leading agencies, which means tens, hundreds of artists being concerts, a very fantastically talented and multiverse team. So I think many concerns in the whole industry has been put to this internationally acknowledged London hub with artists, management agencies, publishing houses, productions bureau. So you may represent them now in some way for our continental audience. So how did you survive? I don't like that word, and please take it in a very positive way. We come later on which experience you are projecting for the next year. But just right now, give us please a small advice and more idea what's going on, how you made the best out of that sometimes quite dreadful context and environment.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you also for inviting me. And it's a pleasure to join great friends and colleagues. Yes, well, our entire business fell off the edge of a cliff. I suppose that's the simple way of putting it forward. Concerts stop, artists stop playing, fees are not paid, commission is not paid. That's quite a chasm to be facing. I think one of the first things we needed to think about, obviously all of our staff immediately went to working at home, working remotely, which we were quite well equipped to do already, because that has been a way of working that many of the staff already did. But as I've been listening to my colleagues, the phrase keeps coming back to me, one that I use a lot: creative partnership. For me, our business is about creative partnership. And we had to figure out a way to look after our people, to look after our artists, and to look after our business. And it's actually quite a tightrope act to reconcile the commercial interests of a business like ours with the need to show solidarity with the industry as a whole. Because if we don't all look after the ecosystem, none of us are going to be still standing. And at the heart of it is the art and the artists. We're not here without the art and the artists. So that's a rather big statement to open it all up with. But it's very important, because also one of the first things we all said together as we got into our sort of huddles of, right, what are we going to do now, is we asked ourselves the question, how are we all going to behave? Because when times are tough, it's quite difficult to keep in mind that the way you behave and the way you nurture your relationships is the thing that's actually going to define success, and is also the thing that's going to be remembered by everybody later on. So these were really important guiding principles from the beginning. In practical terms, we got everybody working offline. We tried to be in touch with our artists a lot. A lot of them immediately started performing online, posting performances, all for free. I'm sure we'll have a part of the conversation about the challenges that provides, because for now, and for the future, the issue of value is something we all have to talk about. What is it that everybody is doing, all of our artists are doing, and needs to be recognized as having value, financial value as well as cultural value. We were fortunate, I won't go into any details, but we have a very careful finance director, which meant that at least we started with a bit of money in the bank. And of course, traditionally, fees paid to artists tend to have something of a time lag. So some fees kept coming in. So we didn't run out of cash instantly, which meant that we could keep people working. We used the furlough scheme, but we kept a lot of people working a lot of the time, which meant that we could really jump on every opportunity to be creative with what was still going, taking on the very difficult conversations about compensation, the challenges of what force majeure means or doesn't mean, encouraging partners elsewhere that we wanted to, everybody needed to help one another, but the artists had nothing. You know, institutions may have sponsorship, may have public funding in other countries. We needed to see that the artists were supported in some way. So we were able to work with those conversations. Simultaneously, we went into a sort of pivot to look at digital ourselves, to look at partnering with media companies and digital platforms internationally to see where our artists could actually do stuff and get paid for it, which was becoming something that was, you know, almost brought us to tears if anybody actually offered a fee for an artist to go and play somewhere. We had some early help. I will give a shout out to the BBC, because they were amongst the first to say, we'll pay for 28 days ahead. Those artists who were due to have engagements, we'll make good on those agreements. And then as the rest of Europe started to begin to make things possible without audiences, with small audiences, we have been working with our artists and with those presenters, again, in creative partnership, to look at new dates, new programs, reduced orchestrations. More recently, with the whack-a-mole game of quarantine regulations, we have a centralized information bulletin for our office, for our colleagues, because as you say, we have very many people working, not just in London, but in Munich and in Paris, we have offices. And in fact, quite a lot of our staff retreated to homes all over the world. So in any one team meeting on Zoom these days, we might have people calling in from 10 different countries. So we're constantly looking at the quarantine regulations. We have artists switching engagements. I've got a conductor doing 3 weeks in Norway this month, because his original week was one thing. Then he said, yes, I'll go and do the quarantine. Then the same orchestra said, can you do the week before, because the original conductor can't make it. And then another orchestra in Norway said, can you come to us the week after, because we can't have our conductor either. And we literally have our own artists swapping engagements with one another when they can get to a place that another one can't. We have the advantage of an international reach. Enough people at their desks, at their phones. I've never worked so hard in my life. We said at the beginning, you know, considering the concert halls are silent, we're all working more hours than we ever thought possible. But there is a great feeling of positive energy. We're seeing results. A lot of our artists are really quite busy at the moment, although not necessarily in the places they were expecting to be. I think we're constantly looking to the future. IAMA, of course, the International Artist Managers Association, has also been a resource, small subcommittees working on all of these challenges, and we take a lot of comfort and strength from working together. It's not an association where the members are primarily interested in beating one another to the finishing line. There's actually a lot of collaboration and sharing of information and skills and expertise. And in the middle of all of this, we have to keep in mind to the future where that question of what's valuable, what is the value of what artists are doing, of what we are doing, what are we giving to society, what are the crucially important things we have to think about, which we'll come on to. But Chichi will talk about this much more than I can, but in terms of inclusion, accessibility, social justice, the environment, maybe another little bit of silver lining from this cloud is that by necessity, artists and projects, we will find different ways of working which don't brutalize the environment as we have historically and increasingly done.
Wow, I was just thinking, Lydia, this is a real business case you are describing, and that scenario I wish would be taught in the next future in the business schools and schools of economics. I never thought the classical music would be once ever, a kind of experimental place where everyone has got to think about the value he's giving to society. And probably such initiative like Chineke anticipated that move, and we were all together feeling that in the last years, maybe even decades, was the most visionary between us. But now it's just reality. And maybe one very, very striking aspect, and we come to that with you, Lydia, back in a couple of minutes, but is the fact that globalization, which has been such a key reality for our industry, seems to be moving a little bit more into something which looks more like coming back to local resources, making more with less, having not only 1-2 concerts, but a time with community, even for international artists. I move my view back to Graham, because globalization is daily life and reality in the contemporary music scene since the end of World War II, much probably. Did you also observe that shift in the last months? Have you? I absolutely know that Huddersfield, which is I may say to everyone, one of the leading contemporary music festivals in Europe and the world, but Huddersfield had always been deeply embedded into his community, which is a little bit different from some new music festivals on the continent. But did you also observe that shift? How did it look this year with your program contents and also with your staff? How did you react very concretely to this new environment, to this new health and sanitary context?
Yeah, well, how do we continue to react? I think we have to continue to react with a great deal of flexibility, and that's going to continue for some time. We almost change how we react and we adapt on a daily or a weekly basis at the moment. I think when the UK locked down in March, there was a real sense that a lot of people said to me, well, Huddersfield will surely continue. It's November, it's months away. But as the weeks and months went on, I think that became obvious that was increasingly unlikely. And in fact, we took a decision in August that it wasn't possible to run the festival this year as a 10-day live event with 70 plus concerts. And the reasons for that really were, you know, in a festival edition, we would bring about 400 musicians from about 40 plus countries and audiences of about 8 to 10,000 to Huddersfield. Many audiences even coming from all over the world. We sell tickets in the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, as well as all over Europe. And that seemed to me it was an awful lot of people to bring together at the one time and to keep everyone safe and healthy and well as a huge financial risk if we had to then make a last minute cancellation of the festival. As we'll all know, it's impossible to get any insurance cover for anything to do with COVID. So yeah, very reluctantly, we cancelled the festival, and we've now modelled a 3-day festival primarily for online and broadcast. We're very fortunate. We have BBC Radio 3 as our broadcast partners anyway at HCMF. And I think actually maybe, you know, there's been an awful lot of concentration in online and digital. And sometimes maybe we forget that there's a perfectly tried and tested method of distributing sound and music across the country and across the world to people who can't physically be in the space, and that's radio. So yeah, we do 3 days. We've commissioned a number of works for online. I've tried to avoid the idea of anyone playing solo from their kitchen, which I've become slightly fatigued about over the year. So we've tried actually to create works that are designed for the digital space, and been able to try things a little bit differently. Maybe there's some artists involved in the 3 days this year that might surprise people as well. The programme's not quite gone live yet, and we're announcing that in partnership with BBC Radio 3. So forgive me for being a little bit vague on some of the details. I will say that watch out for a broadcast on radio, a live concert broadcast from South Bank that's part of Huddersfield this year as well. So thanks, Gillian, for your support in enabling us to do that. I think touching on some of your, well, first of all, I think probably I'd say that, you know, I think there's been an assumption that festivals are okay because if they can't happen this year, they'll simply happen next year. There's things that can pop up, and if they miss a year, there's no big deal. I think that's wrong. I think there's a real threat to festivals at the moment. I think, you know, we can afford to not have a live event this year. I think if that was to continue into next year, that would cause real problems. Because I think we'd be naive to not recognise that for annual events, people fall into annual habits. You know, so a lot of people buy tickets for annual events as soon as the information comes out, and they do it automatically because they've been doing it for years. And I think when you break that habit, you know, sometimes you don't automatically renew that habit. And so while there'll be a group of people who are very desperate to get back to that live event and that festival they've gone to for years, there'll be others who break that habit. Also, how we manage the whole thing of rolling over concerts. We've rolled over much of this year's planned programme into next year. That creates a domino effect, of course, and then the stuff that we'd planned for 21 rolls to 22. And there's a whole ecology of how you make that work in terms of premieres and co-commissions and co-productions, and the whole thing gets terribly, terribly complex and complicated. So in terms of looking forward, I think this winter will tell us a lot about how the virus behaves. But it may be that for the foreseeable future, until there's a vaccine, we might have to look at, say, Huddersfield operating 3 times a year. So I can break it into smaller chunks, where I'm bringing less people together at any one moment. And I'm reducing that financial risk if we have to make late cancellations. So you might find that HCMF 2021 happens 3 times in smaller chunks across the year. And I guess these are the things I mean about flexibility and adaptability, and we're constantly looking at that. What I would say in the positive is that we've been very aware, and many of my colleagues here have talked about how the industry suddenly stopped, and primarily for artists and musicians, and we've been very aware of that. And I've spent a lot of our energies really over the last 6 months looking at how we could support the sector. And I think to date we've given something like 26 commissions for new works in that 6-month period. Some small commissions for this year for online, to large scale commissions for 21 and 22. And we've expedited payment of all of those commissions right now, irrespective of when they're actually going to take place. So that's been a positive. That's been one thing. My staff have been amazing. They're all, no one's been furloughed. They're all working from home. They've been so dedicated, so focused, so hardworking, and so desperate just to get back to putting on live events. And they've been amazing. The last thing I'd just say for the moment is looking at you know, our working patterns and how we proceed. And you touched a little bit on the fact, Eric, that Huddersfield's very international. We co-produce a lot with international festivals. We move works around Europe. We tour work as part of touring circuits with international partners. And there is a lot of talk about the shift to digital and the positives of that, and how we deal with environmental issues going forward. And I think we just have to be cautious a little bit about the way we talk about digital and embrace it at the moment. And I'm by no means an expert, so I say that right away. But let me just quote from a report from Reset, which looks at the environment and energy use. And this is from December 2019. And it says the use of digital technology now actually causes more CO2 emissions and has a bigger impact on global warming than the entire aviation industry. And that was in December 2019. So I think we have to look at other things as well. I think when we're moving musicians around, we have to look at how we make better use of their time in whatever country they're in. I think cheap flights has meant that we don't communicate and cooperate so much as we used to in terms of touring, and making sure that tours are elongated and artists can move from country to country and stay in that country and maximise their time there. Cheap flights have meant it's much easier to fly back, a couple of weeks later, fly back again. But yeah, so I'm just slightly cautious about the feeling from the sector about embracing digital going forward. The other thing I'd say is that I think we have learned a lot about digital, and there's been a lot of focus from the Arts Council and government in recent years about the cultural sector increasing its digital offer. I think if there's one thing we've learned during the 6 months as well, is that also requires learning new skills. It requires new partnerships, and it requires investment from the government to allow us to do that. I'll leave it there for the moment.
Okay, thank you so much, Graham. So I think digital, that magic word, have been dropped many times already in that conversation. So maybe it's time to be a little bit more specific and asking Guillaume Descotes, founder, CEO of Vialma, the web streaming service, what happened in this last months. As you may all know, dear friends, why your audiences were at home, Vialma's and other web streaming services audiences were in front of a screen, and some of them were quite young also. Some of them were working a lot, as Lydia said. Our staff was working more than ever, and many other people were working a lot or homeschooling their children. So Guillaume, did you see some I can say that feedback from these audience, your audience? Did you see some uprising development of it in these last weeks and months? Could you maybe share some ideas, some datas on the repertoire, the artists which have been followed by your audience. So what has happened behind the doors, behind the curtains, while we were trying in the performing arts market to come through that period?
Sure. So first, thank you very much for being part of this panel. Nice to meet you all. So a very quick word about Viama. We're a streaming service of classical and jazz with now 50,000 monthly listeners. And our key difference is that we empower people. We empower users in their music journey. So if one stat about what they did during confinement is they streamed more than 1,000 different composers. It's 4 times more than what's broadcasted in the classic radio station. And on the other side, we empower artists and orchestras so that they can talk to their audience and generate revenue streams online. So we do that for something as big as Opéra de Paris, and to also very intimate and family-sized festival like the Brecon Jazz Festival. And what we did during the lockdown was very, very interesting, I think, for the future. So I'm here to say that there is a big opportunity ahead of us for creative partnerships. I love this term, Lydia. And so some stats, as you asked, Eric. I didn't have time to collect a lot of them. So from the back of my mind, we did a 45% increase in total streams from one quarter to the other, and this trend is still very strong in the third quarter. We have also significantly increased the share of people who are less than 35 and who are streaming the service, but it's something that Deezer also experienced. They did a survey with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, and on their side it's plus 17%. In terms of content, I think the big winner for what we offer online on Viama is how classical music is relevant to people's daily lives. So mindfulness playlists were extremely important. So we decided to do collaborative ones where people could chat and discuss about how music would really help them and why. Everything which is related also to their activities during lockdown. So reading. I don't know if you saw the stats of books sales, but the number of books sold dramatically increased also. So culture is I don't think we can say that culture was in terms of usage is lost online. There was a big and at home there was a big surge. Talking about this is. I find it very important how classical music is relevant to people's lives, because we were asked by first-class media like The Times in the UK or TF1. Excuse my French, but it's the number one French TV channel, and TF1, so they asked us to curate for them programs which would help their audience going through those times, and I think this is a very it's a very, very, very positive message for me. It's classical music is. You have more young people listening to classical music today than 10 years ago, according to the British recording industry. And I think it's we have a very strong message to deliver. So how I hear what you said about what's the value which comes from digital, and that's actually our mission. I used to work 10 years in private equity, and when I launched Viama, it was really to create a business model which would be fair and generate revenues online for everybody. So we had a very sharp increase in our paying subscriptions. one note which is very important for us, but it's more monthly than yearly, and it used to be very much yearly. So people were deeply convinced that they would use it during the year, and with lockdown, it's more people who postpone the fact that they would choose a streaming service. And with lockdown, they thought, okay, it's going to last 2-3 months, and so I'll give it a go for a monthly trial. And pay and see how it leads me. But the people stayed, and that's a very positive news also for the industry. We kept our royalty per stream, which we maintain at 3 cents per stream. That's 20 times more than Spotify, and it's one of the highest we know of in the industry. And we decided to give back all our income. We did a fundraising just before in January, so we decided to give back all our income for those for the second quarter to artists and independent labels which partnered with us. And over the other thing, we thought it's not enough, and so what we did is that we opened our platform to any artist or concert hall who would like to, so that they could get a high revenue share. So in a way, it's like everything which is currently on Spotify, on Facebook, or on YouTube for free. You can do it on Vyama and get a proper revenue stream for this. And I'm very. We tried some things. Some things failed, of course. Some things work, and some people do make income thanks to us in a very reasonable share. But I love this term of creative partnerships. I'll get another one which is Stronger Together. I know it was Hillary Clinton's motto, and it didn't really bring her any luck. But let's take those words and revamp them and give them a new future. And so I would be very, very happy to try new things and to customize what we're doing so that it answers the needs of artists and concert halls.
Thanks, Guillaume. Some reaction to that, maybe, Gillian. We can't hear you, Gillian. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, great.
Just underlining what Guillaume was just saying about people turning to the arts at this time, and there are all these extraordinary statistics, and I would argue that looking forward, we're going to need the arts more than ever. There have been key moments in history where we have really particularly come to the arts, and I would say in the UK certainly after the war, when the South Bank Centre was built, the Royal Festival Hall was built as part of the Festival of Britain, and the Arts Council was created, and things like the National Youth Orchestra, etc. But just going back to this time, I mean, something we've been doing is, I've been personally doing on our website is creating playlists, a particular one focused on mental health, a particular one focused on nature, because the Hayward Gallery as part of South Bank has been open, and there's this wonderful exhibition that, about trees, which is something that somehow is just so relevant. People have also turned to nature during this time. But I think a key thing to remember is that certainly in the UK, there's 20% of people do not have access to the internet, do not have any digital access, and are therefore disenfranchised. And my colleagues in our education team have been running a project this whole time, really quite under the radar, but it's coming into the light of day now. It's called Art by Post. It doesn't involve music at this point, but it involves poets and writers and visual artists sending out arts activities to people who are not connected digitally. And we're working through institutions, organizations who have, who are in the community, who know who these people are, who can follow up with them, who can support them. And we've had artwork sent back, we've had poetry sent back, and the poetry is now, there are big poems on billboards around the South Bank, part of an outdoor exhibition that we've got on at the moment called Everyday Heroes, which is about frontline workers. That's something that I think it's important to remember, that digital is not available to everybody. And just going on what Graham said about the radio, yes, also that's a simpler old technology that we've all got access to, and in the UK we've got the great resource of the BBC and Radio 3, BBC Radio 3, the classical music channels, coming in residence for 2 weeks to the South Bank in the middle of October and broadcasting live every night, which will help us to, I think, we're working very much with Chichi and with our colleagues to try and talk on Radio 3 as well as play music. We've got a much more diverse range of composers than our orchestras are used to playing, thanks partly to Chichi's provocation. And some real hard work going on behind the scenes to find repertoire that the orchestras have not played historically before, but also making sure that we get different voices on the airwaves, on the radio. We get the voices of young people, the young musicians that we're all associated with. Young people have suffered disproportionately during this period. So we're very keen that the airwaves are buzzing with the voices of young people and hearing from them and hearing how they imagine the future and what they need to happen. So yeah, just using everything that's at our disposal to try and change the landscape, because we can't go back to, well, one thing we can't do, I think, is go back to normal. I mean, everybody said that in different ways. Lydia said it very eloquently. We've learned so many things and we're continuing to learn so many things. We don't know what's ahead of us. But if we were to go back to things as they were, it would be tragic, I think. It would be a tragic waste of everything that everybody's suffered and learned and gone through in this period.
Super, super. May I ask every one of you, and please take the word if you feel relevant. So coming to new perspectives, 2021, how can we make sure classical music, which seems to be now acknowledged even by the youth in different countries in Europe, as a tool, a practice leading to more mindfulness, to more serenity, to more well-being? How can we use our practice together with our artists to contribute to more understanding, to feeling stronger together? Which is your roadmap on this in 2021? May I ask every one of you, what is your roadmap for the coming season and year? Well, knowing that there is a huge uncertainty, of course. Chichi, please, first.
Well, I would like to hear from everybody what exactly their plans are to come back being more resilient and more relevant to our communities. What exactly are people doing that is really visible and blatantly clear to, because, up until lockdown, classical music resides in this elite little box that make awful lot of people not feel as if that it's relevant to them. And it's the one thing where I've always felt slightly out of place, and which is one of the driving reasons behind the reason why I created Chineke in the first place, and discovered all these other people who I didn't know existed felt the same way. And what can we do as a collective? I think what we are doing is, just by our very existence is this challenge. And just by our very existence, our audiences are different. Just by our very programming, it brings out all kinds of other things that I never saw for 35 years of my previous career. I've got two lives. I've got the pre-Chineke life and then Chineke life. And I know everyone talks about this new way that we're going. What is going to change? What is going to change? Because I know we haven't started yet, really, but unless every single organization holds their themselves and their colleagues accountable for being relevant, we don't have a young person on this. I mean, I'm not saying we're all old. I'm counting myself in this, but look at this panel. Just look at the panel. We don't have all the answers to what our young people need and what they want. I would love to see youth on every single panel that I sit on. And, you know, one of the things that we did right from the very beginning was have a junior orchestra right from day one, because they have just as much say, and members of them play. We always have one in every single section of the professional orchestra, because it's a relay. It's constantly pulling up the next generation so that they are fit for purpose and action when they are put on the spot professionally and when they start at conservatoire, etc. But I really think I want to hear the young people's voices tell us what they need. And just looking at the protests on the streets after the George Floyd murder, the amount of young people on those streets. I know, well, you know, my kids and nephews and nieces said, Chichi, stay at home, you're too old. We don't want you getting COVID. But, you know, we'll march for you. But when you look at the amount of young people who went out saying, we don't like this world anymore. We are sick and tired of what happens to Black people, just without batting an eyelid all the time. And from Black to white and everything in between were out marching. I feel the younger generation properly understands the benefits of inclusion. And unless every single project at the South, you know, I mean, I know my home is the South Bank, and I really, you know, as Gillian said, you know, I really did provoke the whole, you know, the question of what are we doing in October, Black History Month. Every single orchestra, not just Chineke Orchestra, should be responsible for diversifying programs, diversifying who's working in the organization, who's on your board, literally everything. I'll stop now. Sorry.
Even if I recognize it, Chichi, many thanks for these words, that we are a little bit slightly, all of us, over 30. But I know some of us who are programming very young artists or managing. Maybe Lydia, HP has always been very much on the age of youth, diversity, definitely inclusion, and we are all so admirative for this. So tell us about your young artists. How do they feel now, and how do they see 2021?
Well, I will, but I'd like to rise to Chichi's challenge immediately, because she asks the question, what's everybody doing in real terms to face these challenges? So a direct answer to a direct question, and Chichi knows this, but many may not. Last autumn, we launched the Harrison Parrott Foundation, which has as its core mission the promotion of equality, inclusion, accessibility for classical music and the creative arts. As part of that, we have a program called Artists for Inclusivity, where our international artists of all generations, when they're coming through London, or maybe they'll make a special trip, are teaming up with Triborough Music Hub to contribute to their program, bringing music to young people and their families in the Triborough region of London, which is around our office in Hammersmith. We have said to Triborough, tell us what you need and what you want. We're not saying to them, this is what we think you need, which is a very important part of the whole project. That's one sort of block of work. We have also teamed up with an organization called Creative Access, which creates a bridge between people from different kinds of backgrounds, not just different backgrounds according to color or race, different socioeconomic backgrounds, who would like to work in the creative arts. And frankly, they're not the people who walk through the door when you put an advert in The Guardian. You just never meet them. So we have undertaken to commit to 4 young people for apprenticeships in pairs of 6 months each year. We are committed to doing what we can to make our workplace more diverse, as well as in a sort of leading from the top way, trying to deliver that message to our artists. So conversations on a daily basis with conductors and instrumentalists and others, and thinking about the way we're programming projects, broadening all of our colleagues' minds about the range of repertoire and collaborations that are possible. We have also actually signed up for the London Music Masters initiative. Will be in the autumn cohort, which is about embedding diversity and inclusivity within the workplace. So these are small steps, and we are horribly late to the party. Everybody knows that, but at least we try. We do what we can. For our young artists, to answer that question, they are extremely challenged, but they are extremely optimistic and they're extremely creative. The business of bringing music to the people, I think, is something we all need to think about very much. It's already been touched on by colleagues. It's a necessity when you can't get into a concert hall, or where not many people can get into a concert hall. But we have young artists especially who are being very creative about, getting in buses and taking those buses around and literally playing from a truck with the side down, trying to create situations where with sponsorship behind them, they can offer free concerts to communities in places where they don't have big festivals or they don't have a concert hall. This sense, again, of responsibility, of an artist's responsibility to a community, is something that more and more of our artists are demonstrating and finding really skillful and creative ways to fulfill.
Great. Richard, maybe on programming for young artists and more diversity into your concert hall?
Yes, thank you. I mean, it's a really important issue, and for us at St John's, actually, it's a question of perception as well, because our building is a 300-year-old Georgian edifice in the middle of a beautiful leafy green square in central London, and so there can be a problem with a perceived barrier for people that it's not for them, and I'm acutely aware that this is something that we need to tackle, and we need to break down that barrier. Practical things that we are embarking on at the moment. One thing from the past 6 months that I've got great benefit from, actually, has been setting up these forums and panels with our community users, and reaching out and working alongside the amateur sector that comes to St John's, and that's been very interesting to get feedback from that side of the wider community that we serve, and to work with them in how we can plan things in the future and what's relevant to them. And what we're also doing is we've set up a program called Artist Lab, which is to use downtime at St John's, because inevitably we have some downtime at the moment, for emerging artists to try and come to the space and have what we call a safe space to create new work. And we're specifically looking to try and target people who we wouldn't normally see within that program. We're reaching out to colleagues to recommend, and members of the commission recommend people and artists who probably haven't been featured within St John's, whether they're from an ethnically diverse background, or they're from a disadvantaged background, or whatever that may be. We also work with the Triborough Hub as well on that. But we're very keen also to encourage commissioning from people underrepresented in the program at the moment. So it is crucial, but we need to learn from that as well, where we go forward. And one of the things we're implementing at the moment is an qualities audit, which we're going through just to see what we can do and how we need to get better. We're learning from what is currently happening, and Gigi's fantastic work in that area. And Eric's gone.
Eric's gone, so I'll just pick up on a couple of things just when we're talking about young people. I think one of the things when I came to Huddersfield as director of the festival, and I'd come directly from Centre for Contemporary Arts in Glasgow, which was primarily dealing with visual arts. And one noticeable difference in the visual arts, you were always dealing in a contemporary arts centre with the next generation coming out of the art schools and colleges and universities. And then in contemporary music, I was continually getting phone calls from publishers who wanted to talk to me about 80-year-old composers' birthdays and 100 years of someone's anniversary of their passing. And it seemed to me that the generation of artists that we talked about young composers being 50, 60. And then we wondered why the audience was 60 plus. And I remember at my second festival, I made a composer in his 30s, composer in residence at the festival, and at the press conference to launch that programme, a journalist asked me, how could I possibly have this young composer as composer in residence when there was so many neglected masters in contemporary music whose music was never played? And my answer then was, do you want to create another generation of neglected masters, or shall we hear what people are doing now? And I'm glad to say, I mean, that's been, I think, lowering the age of the artist on the stage and the composer has really opened up new audiences. When I started, the percentage of audience under the age of 25 was about 3%. And it's now about 27, 28% of our audience. But also wanted to say, that it's all very well putting younger artists on stage. That's part of it, getting younger audiences. But we need to involve young people in the decision-making processes. And the other thing we're doing at the moment, when I started getting involved in putting on music in Glasgow in my late teens, it was because people no one was bringing the music I wanted to hear to the city. So I brought some of that stuff to the city. And you lose money. And then once you lose your own money, you work out how to do it better next time. And I kind of had this hunch that there was a lot of people who were doing things in their own communities and their own networks and putting on things that they wanted to hear because no one else was putting it on. And we started a programme last year that's running this year and next year, identifying 6 young curators, we're calling them. So we had an outreach worker who was going out looking for people who were doing things within their own networks and their own communities. And it didn't have to be contemporary music. It didn't have to even be music. It was putting on art and cultural events of some sort, whether that was illegal raves in the woods or whatever. But I figured, there was things that no matter what cultural practice you're involved in, there are certain business practices that will help you do it better and avoid some of the pitfalls. And that's really what the programme is about. And there's 2 aspects to it. One is looking at helping them put on work in their own communities and networks and helping them do it better. And secondly is then giving them a safe space within the festival to curate and put on work and for us to help them promote that. And they have access to me on a mentoring basis, and they have access to all of my team and the different skills they have, whether it's in contracts, business, marketing, press, technology, whatever. But we have to, I think, and I feel a great responsibility. We have a huge travelling audience to Huddersfield, and that's amazing, and we want to continue that. But I feel a real responsibility as to how we're more relevant and increasingly more relevant to the people who live and work in the area. And, we see lots of different communities at our education and our learning and participation events. We have to find ways to get more of those audiences into our concerts as well and connect the dots. But I think one way to help us do that is actually put faith in younger people who live and work in the area and involve them in the decision-making processes of what we do. And that's what we're trying to do at the moment. On an international scale, at the moment I'm involved in a 4-year Creative Europe project, which is really about curation and diversity. And a quick plug, there's a symposium I'm speaking at in Berlin tomorrow, although obviously I'm not in Berlin, which is it's with the Academy de Kunst, and it's curating diversity, decolonizing contemporary music in Europe. So you'll find that on the Sounds Now website. Just quick plug, sorry.
Thank you. A big program.
Out of interest, Graham, is it a diverse group of people leading this thing that you're discussing? How diverse is the organisers of this?
No, they're not, and
project?
I think there's an acceptance of that, and the whole program. It's 10 festivals, and from around Europe, and one of the things within that. Well, actually, that's not true. I'm saying, because I'm thinking about the 10 festival directors, and I'm saying there's not diversity involved. But actually, there's a number of mentors who are working as part of the Sounds Now project for the next 2 years. Then it'll change with 2 years again, and there is diversity deliberately within those mentors who are working with us and our organisations, as well as our audiences and musicians.
Can I ask how many people are in leadership roles? Can I ask how many people in leadership roles are diverse, that have been brought in? How many of our organisations are looking at bringing decision makers in, not just people always in a mentoring or in a sort of training role, but how are we going to hit this immediately? Because if there's no decision makers, there's no leaders, then we're still in the same situation, aren't we? We're just like stirring the coffee, really.
The whole point of the programme is about opening up the decision-making process. I should say this started in December 19, and COVID hit us in March. So it's a 4-year programme. It's very early stages. This is the first symposia, and we're not going to solve everything overnight. But that's certainly the aim of the programme, is how you open up the curatorial and decision-making process. You make it more diverse, and you make it less hierarchical as well. And there's various research going on over the 4 years. There's various strands, whether that's projects, whether it's events. But have a look at the website. Chi-Chi, have a look at the website. Sounds Now.
A couple of months ago, when we were discussing the behind closed doors concerts that all of the South Bank orchestras are doing, I just put out this massive plea, and I wrote a letter to every single orchestra, and just said, look, don't just leave all this stuff to Chineke Orchestra, and that all of you are exempt from doing anything about this. And that is why October is Black History Month, but that is why we're going to hear 22 or 23 pieces of music, written by composers of different ethnicities, performed by all of the other orchestras except the Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment. They're the only orchestras who didn't want to take part in this. But, and I hope that, I know that some of these orchestras are going to just be blown away by some of the gems of music that they're going to discover. And then they'll start to realize, gosh, what we have been missing all of these years. It's like, when I graduated from the Royal Academy of Music in 1981, there was not a single woman in the London Symphony Orchestra because it was against policy. And I remember thinking, wow, the Royal Academy of Music, there's 50% of male and female, and yet 50% of us can't apply for these jobs. So the country is cutting off 50% of its talent. So why are we still doing the same with composers of ethnicity and things like that? And I think, so when I said that at the South Bank meetings, I think the South Bank then said, look, we want to see something happening. So London Philharmonic, Philharmonia, Aurora, BBC Concert Orchestra, they're all bringing music written by composers that have been written out of history. And I think they're going to have a fantastic time with it. And I would just love to see all of the venues saying, right, okay, your organization's coming, but you have to show make every single organization accountable. Like Manhattan School of Music have been brilliant. They've said for the whole of the coming year, every student recital has to include a piece of music that's composed by a Black American composer or Black British composer or something. It can be done. And, if no one's prepared to make radical decisions like that, we need you to be making these decisions, because it's one of the things. I had a couple of meetings. Well, I had about 6 meetings at the Carnegie Hall last year with all heads of different departments, and I think it was in the meeting with Sarah Johnson. She's amazing. I mean, I'd had a meeting with her in London, and then she called me for a meeting at the Carnegie, and she called some of her colleagues in. And at one point during this meeting, she exploded. She's a blue-eyed blonde lady. She exploded and said, Chichi, the thing is, it's not, the work that you are doing is just incredible, but why are you having to do all the work? You guys didn't cause this. We did, and it's us who are keeping you out. It's up to us white organizations who have to make these decisions and have to make those things happen, because I can bang on to you all day long about this, but I need you to take up, I don't have the luxury to remain silent. All of you do have the luxury to remain silent on this, and for all I know, you will continue that. But I plead with you to just realize how much you can do yourselves, and don't allow yourself to sit there in silence and not insist.
Thanks. I'm sure, Graham, Chichi, your dialogue will remain into the highlights of our webinar series. Thank you so much. Like so many of your interventions. I have to thank and apologize for Gillian Moore, who had to leave a couple of minutes ago. She had an important board meeting at South Bank Centre. We are now running short of time. We are all, I think, observing this kind of challenge. We have a friend ahead of us, more attention than ever from the youth and working people for our classical music practice and repertoire, and models, financial models, contents models in constant evolution. And we are all of us developing ways, or you all of us developing ways of meeting that challenge. I don't know if anyone wants to make some conclusive or pseudo-conclusive words. Maybe some idea I would just like to put into this debate. Lydia Connolly already mentioned it. How can we make people perceiving value into artistic intervention, not only on stage but also on screen? There will be a lot of debate on this probably in the coming days. In the UK, Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment is starting his new model with a kind of pay what you think is worth at next week with a new digital service. I think there will be many more initiatives going in that direction. Maybe if one of you or two of you want to give us his own opinion of these current initiatives, or what he has, what he's planning, maybe Guillaume shortly, and maybe one of you.
Yeah. First on diversity, we do a lot of things, but I'll contact you afterwards to see what we can do more, because I think it's the point is not really to review what we're already doing, because we should all do more. So I'll contact you afterwards to tell me what we can do with our streaming service, and for how to bring value online. First, I think we need to think out of the world of classical music, just so that we put ourselves in the shoes of our listeners, who have a very broad range of experiences online, and with other streaming services, generally streaming services. So I'm not going to name anyone, but for some you can have music and you can deliver your nappies. I have two young children for the same price. So music, in a way, is a commodity was put into a commodity by some industry players. I think it's going to be very hard to bring value again on the recording itself, because the amounts at stake are so huge that it's going to take a bit of time. That said, I think that the emotion which is brought by listening the recording, and the link which you have with someone online, which can be extremely intimate. It's a different experience from what you have on the concert hall. This has been proven to have an amazing value today. And I strongly believe that this value coming from this emotion, from this link that we can collectively have online, or this feeling of being together in another form, is going to outpace the decrease of value on the recording itself. But that requires that we change the formats and that we change the settings and that we change the way we present music. If we look at the history of music, forms, and the number of people in an orchestra, everything has changed many times. And I think today is a moment where we will have to reinvent also the format itself. And I don't think that if we just copy paste what's going on in the real world and we bring it online, we will be able to make something happen. And so this whole so that I think there are a lot of opportunities that we'll find together. We found some things. There's also some other examples from other music forms, but it will. It requires a change of format, I think.
Okay, so that will be unfortunately our. Great words. Thank you, Guillaume. That will be our conclusive word. It's noon in London. It's 1 p.m. in Paris. Thank you so much to all of you, to all our viewers. The link is still active on YouTube, so you can catch up and replay that conversation as often as you wish to. The next webinar will be dedicated to another quite important territory and countries in Europe, coming in a few weeks, and looking forward to seeing you, all of you, again very soon. Thank you again. Bye.